Marco stood as a beacon of elegance in downtown Seattle. Its brick facade, illuminated by tasteful copper sconces, cast a warm light across the sidewalk. Julian Price adjusted his charcoal suit jacket as he stepped out of the Orion he bought last year, a symbol of his rise from the rough streets of his youth to a successful structural engineer. The Patriot recognized him immediately, having taken his reservation with specific instructions for their 8th anniversary celebration. "Mr. Price, your table is ready. Right this way, sir." The restaurant hummed with the gentle musicality of fine dining. The soft clink of crystal wine glasses, murmured conversations, and the subtle scrape of silver against bone china. Their table, situated in a quiet corner with a view of the Seattle skyline, was exactly what he requested. A bottle of 2015 Verde Special Selection Cabernet Sauvignon, Alina's favorite, already decanted in a crystal vessel. Julian pulled out Alina's chair, noting how she barely glanced up from her phone as she sat. Her cream-colored dress was new. He hadn't seen it before, and it probably cost more than their first month's rent in the starter home they shared 8 years ago. "This is lovely," Alina said, finally tucking her phone away in her designer clutch. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble. 8 years deserve something special," Julian replied, his deep voice carrying the weight of memories. He remembered their wedding day, how she had looked at him then as if he were her entire world. That look had been genuine. The sommelier approached, presenting the wine with practiced flourish. Julian went through the ritual of tasting and approving, though his mind wandered to the changes he had noticed in recent months. Alina's new workout routine at that upscale gym, her sudden interest in designer clothes, the password changes on her devices. "Remember our first anniversary?" he asked, watching her reaction carefully. "That little Italian place in Evergreen. We could barely afford the pasta." Alina's laugh sounded forced. "Oh yes, you wore that horrible blue tie your mother gave you. You said it brought out my eyes." "Did I?" Her phone buzzed in her clutch and her fingers twitched. "The food here looks amazing. Have you tried the sea bass?" Julian noted the deflection, adding it to his mental list of red flags. Growing up in Seattle's toughest neighborhood had taught him to spot lies in a street thug's smile, in a dealer's handshake, in a loved one's eyes. He had survived by paying attention to details others missed. The waiter arrived with their appetizers. "Bruce, get the calamari for her, and the special for him." Alina's phone buzzed again, and this time she couldn't resist. Her fingers darted to her clutch, pulling out the device like someone seeking constant reassurance. Julian asked in a neutral tone, despite the tightening in his stomach, "And then, just some students with questions about tomorrow's advanced class." Her thumbs moved rapidly across the screen, a slight smile playing at her lips. Julian remembered when those smiles were for him, when they had stayed up late talking about their dreams, his plans to start his own engineering firm, her desire to open a yoga studio. Somewhere along the way, those shared dreams had become separate lives. 8 years, he said, raising his wine glass. The crystal caught the candlelight, throwing prismatic shadows across the white tablecloth. "Here's to us." Alina lifted her glass, but her eyes didn't quite meet his. "To us." The hollow ring of their glasses meeting matched the emptiness of their toast. Julian cut into his perfectly cooked filet mignon while watching Alina pick at her salmon. Her phone buzzed again. "I need to use the restroom," she announced, placing her napkin beside her plate with deliberate care. He noticed how her shoulders relaxed slightly at his words, her hand already reaching for her phone instead of heading directly to the restroom. Julian positioned himself behind one of the restaurant's decorative pillars, the marble surface cool against his palm. From this vantage point, he could see Alina's face illuminated by the blue glow of her screen. Gone was the forced smile and distant eyes. Now she was truly engaged, truly present. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, and for a moment, Julian saw a flash of the woman he had married, passionate and alive. Then her phone buzzed again, and he moved silently, years of street-smart instincts taking over. Approaching from her blind spot, his reflection hidden by the restaurant's strategic lighting. The message preview flashed across her screen. Clear as day. Can't wait to be intimate with you again. The sender's name read Damien. Time seemed to crystallize, each second sharp and distinct like broken glass. The pieces clicked into place. The sudden interest in that new gym, the late-night yoga preparation meetings, the password changes on her laptop. He had been a fool not to see it sooner. Taking a deep breath, Julian reached over and plucked the phone from her hands. Elena gasped, her face draining of color as she realized what had happened. Her wineglass tipped, spreading a crimson stain across the pristine tablecloth like blood seeping from a wound. "Julian, I can explain," she said, her voice trembling, hands fluttering like trapped birds. He placed the phone on the table between them. Screen up, the damning message still visible. "Care to explain this, Elena?" His voice was low and controlled but carried an edge sharp enough to cut steel. The nickname he had once used lovingly now tasted like poison on his tongue. Elena's fork clattered against her plate, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. "It's not. It's not what you think." "Not what I think." Julian's laugh was devoid of humor, a sound that belonged more in the rough neighborhoods of his youth than in this upscale restaurant. "Because what I think is that my wife is involved with someone else. What I think is that 8 years of marriage means so little to you that you'd throw it away for some gym owner's affection." Elena pleaded, her eyes darting around as other patrons began to stare. "Please, lower your voice. We can talk about this at home. I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain," Julian said as he pulled out his wallet and dropped several $100 bills onto the table, letting them scatter across the wine stain. "Happy anniversary." He stood, straightening his suit jacket with deliberate calmness that belied the rage building inside him. Growing up, he had learned that true power lay not in explosive anger, but in calculated action. He had survived by thinking 3 steps ahead, and now those same skills would serve a different purpose. "Julian, wait." Elena called after him, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, you don't understand." He didn't turn around. Let her sit there, surrounded by judging eyes and whispered conversations. Let her feel the weight of her betrayal in public. The cool Seattle night air hit his face as he stepped outside, his breaths coming in controlled bursts. A young valet stepped forward with his keys, but Julian waved him off. He needed to walk, needed to feel the solid ground beneath his feet as his world tilted on its axis. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of building a life together, all built on a foundation of lies. As he walked through the downtown streets, past bars and restaurants filled with happy couples, Julian made a promise to himself. He had learned long ago that trust, once broken, could never be truly repaired. Elena had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. Julian Price never played to lose. In the suburban streets of Seattle, as silent as he, Julian pulled into his driveway. The Orion's electric engine was as quiet as his rage. The 2-story Craftsman home loomed before him, every window dark except for the porch light Elena always left on when he worked late. Tonight, that small gesture of consideration felt like another lie. He unlocked the front door and moved through the darkness with practiced ease, ignoring the family photos lining the hallway walls. 8 years of memories, each one now tainted by suspicion. How long had she been planning this? How many of those smiling moments had been fake? Julian headed straight to his home office, the one room in the house that was exclusively his. This was the space where he designed award-winning buildings, where he built his reputation as one of Seattle's most innovative structural engineers. Now it would serve a different purpose. He locked the door behind him, his movements precise and purposeful. Elena's laptop sat on the desk, left there that morning. She had been using his office lately, claiming the lighting was better for her virtual yoga sessions, another deception to add to the growing pile. The laptop hummed to life, its soft blue glow filling the darkness. Julian's fingers hovered over the keyboard, remembering how Elena always used variations of the same password, perhaps their anniversary date, her mother's maiden name, or Namaste Yoga 2016, the year she got her instructor certification. The screen unlocked instantly. Some habits never change, even when everything else does. "Let's see what you've been hiding," Julian muttered as he opened her email client. He had learned long ago that people revealed their true selves through their digital footprints. Back in his old neighborhood, he had watched countless criminals get caught because they couldn't resist bragging online. Elena might not be a criminal, but she had left her own trail of evidence. The first red flag appeared in her sent folder, dozens of emails to becoulter@primefitseattle.com. Julian clicked on the oldest one, dated 3 months ago. "Damien, thank you for the amazing session today. You really pushed me to my limits. Can't wait for our next private training." Read the email, innocent enough on the surface, but Julian noticed the timestamp. 11:47 p.m. What kind of legitimate training session ended that late? He dug deeper, moving systematically through emails. The messages grew more explicit over time, evolving from thinly veiled flirtation to outright intimate content. There were photos that made his stomach turn, of his wife, the woman with whom he had built a life, posing with another man. But it was the financial emails that truly made his blood boil. Hidden in a folder labeled Studio Expansion, he found their plans. "Baby, I checked our joint account again. You never even look at the statements. I'm busy with my precious buildings. We could easily move $50,000 to help with the gym expansion. By the time you notice, we'll be long gone. Miss you already." Julian's jaw clenched as he read message after message. They had been plotting to steal his money to destroy everything he had worked for. He had grown up with nothing, fought his way through engineering school, built his career from the ground up. And his wife had planned to rob him for some gym owner's affection. He opened her photo gallery next. Hundreds of pictures filled the screen. Elena with a man he recognized from the gym's website. Damien Cole, owner of Prime Fit Seattle. In some photos, they were working out together. In others, they were clearly more intimate. The timestamps showed a pattern, always during her supposed advanced yoga training sessions. "Think you're clever," Julian whispered, methodically downloading and organizing the evidence. Growing up, he had learned that revenge required patience and planning. You didn't just react. You gathered intel, built your case, and struck when they least expected it. He found their text messages next, backed up to her cloud storage. Thousands of messages, each one another nail in the coffin of his marriage. "Miss your touch on me. Can't wait to leave this boring life behind." The messages painted a clear picture. While he had been designing buildings, attending client meetings, and believing in their marriage, Elena had been planning her escape with Damien. They had been laughing at him, mocking his trust, plotting to steal his money. A sound from downstairs broke his concentration. The front door opened, then closed softly. Elena was home. Julian checked the time. 1:23 a.m. She had stayed at the restaurant for nearly 2 hours after he left, probably calling Damien and planning damage control. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, hesitant and uneven. She was likely inebriated, trying to drown her guilt in expensive wine. The footsteps paused outside his office door, and he could practically feel her uncertainty through the solid oak. "Julian," her voice was small and tentative. "Can we talk?" He remained silent, continuing to document her betrayal. The doorknob rattled slightly, keeping her out just as she had kept him from knowing the truth of their marriage. "Please," she tried again. "What you saw. It's not everything. I can explain." Julian's fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, taking screenshots, saving emails, documenting every betrayal. He had learned long ago that begging was just manipulation in disguise. The rough streets of his youth had taught him that mercy only invited more betrayal. "I love you, Elena," she said through the door, her voice cracking. "What we have means everything to me." The lies would have worked once, back when he believed in second chances, but the evidence on the screen told a different story. In one email to Damien, dated just last week, She had written, "I've never felt this way before. What I have with Julian is nothing compared to us. You make me feel alive." He found their joint account statements next, tucked away in a folder labeled Budget Planning. The transactions told their own story. Large withdrawals disguised as yoga retreat payments, studio equipment purchases that never existed. They had already stolen nearly $20,000. "Julian, please just talk to me." Her voice had grown desperate, but he continued his work. Every document he found was another piece of ammunition, another nail in the coffin of their marriage. He had survived his tough childhood by learning to see people for who they really were, not who they pretended to be. And now he saw Elena clearly for the first time. The sound of her sliding down the door reached his ears, followed by quiet sobs. Let her cry. Let her feel a fraction of the pain she had planned to inflict on him. He would shed his own tears later in private. After hours of focused work, Julian built his case. He tracked their meetings through gym check-in records she had forwarded to her email. He found hotel reservations, restaurant receipts, planned rendezvous disguised as yoga workshops. Every detail was cataloged, every lie exposed. As dawn painted the Seattle sky in shades of gold and amber, Julian finally sat back in his chair. On the screen before him lay the complete anatomy of his wife's betrayal. Dates, times, locations, messages, photos, and financial records. Everything he needed to destroy not just their marriage, but the comfortable life she had planned with her lover. The office door was silent now. Elena had given up sometime around 3 a.m., retreating to their bedroom. Soon she would wake, probably hoping the previous night had been a bad dream. But Julian had spent the night turning that dream into a nightmare from which she would never wake. He stretched his muscles, stiff from hours of focused work. The familiar ache reminded him of late nights studying engineering, of the dedication it took to escape his past. He had built himself up from nothing once before. He could do it again. But first, he had scores to settle. Looking at the organized evidence on his screen, Julian allowed himself a grim smile. In his old neighborhood, they had a saying, "Revenge is a dish best served with receipts," and he had every receipt he needed to serve Elena and her lover the meal they deserved. That morning after the anniversary dinner, the day was cold and gray, matching Julian's mood as he prepared for work. He moved through his morning routine like a ghost, ignoring Elena's red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands as she tried to make coffee in the kitchen. "I made your favorite breakfast," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "The eggs are just how you like them." Julian poured his coffee into a travel mug without sparing a glance at the perfectly plated breakfast. He wasn't hungry. His words cut through the kitchen's tension like a blade. "Please, can we just talk about this?" Elena stepped toward him, reaching for his arm. "What you saw, it's not," Julian interrupted in a deadly calm tone, "and you'll regret it." The threat wasn't physical. Julian had never been that kind of man. But the promise in his words made Elena stumble backward, as if he had struck her. She watched helplessly as he walked out the door without another word. A decisive move from Harris Engineering. Julian buried himself in his work, using his lunch breaks to plan his next moves. His office, with its wall of windows overlooking downtown Seattle, had always been a sanctuary. Now it became his war room. "Everything okay, Julian?" Simon, his project manager, asked after a particularly tense client meeting. "You seem different." "Never better," Julian replied, his focus never leaving the blueprint spread across his desk. He had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited predators. Keep your pain private, your plans secret, and your enemies guessing every evening. He returned home late, long after Elena's yoga classes would have ended. He found her schedule online, her actual classes, not the fake ones she used as cover for meeting Damien. The studio closed at 7. He made sure to arrive no earlier than 9. The first night, she had waited up for him, sitting in the dark living room like a ghost. "I canceled my evening classes," she had said during a phone call. "I thought we could talk." Nothing to talk about. Julian headed straight for his office, the lock clicking behind him with finality. The second night, she tried a different approach, wearing the red dress he knew he loved, her hair styled the way he always preferred. "I made reservations at that new Italian place you mentioned." She called through his office door, the one by the river. Julian didn't respond, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he documented more evidence of their financial schemes. He discovered they had been planning to drain the accounts gradually, making it look like business expenses for her yoga studio. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated, premeditated theft. By the third night, Alina's desperation had begun to show. She paced the hallway outside his office, her phone clutched in her hand. "You can't just shut me out forever," she said, her voice cracking. "We're married. We need to deal with this." Julian continued his work, ignoring her words, just as she had ignored their vows. On his screen, another email from Damien appeared in her inbox. "Babe, don't worry. He'll cool down eventually. Guys like him always do. They're too afraid of losing what they have. Give it time. Love you." Julian's jaw clenched as he added the email to his growing file of evidence. Damien had never known real men who had grown up fighting for every scrap of respect, who understood that sometimes you had to dismantle everything to build something stronger. The fourth day brought a shift in Alina's behavior. She left for the gym early, her yoga bag packed with more clothes than usual. Julian knew she was meeting Damien. His surveillance software had captured their text messages planning the rendezvous. "Need to see you," she had written. "Everything's falling apart." Damien's response had been typically arrogant. "Come to the gym. I'll make you forget all about him." Let them meet, Julian thought. Let them plot and plan, thinking they had the upper hand. Every secret meeting was just more evidence for his case, more ammunition for the war to come. At work, Julian maintained his professional facade, but his colleagues had begun to notice the change in him. His designs, always precise, had taken on an almost brutal efficiency. His client presentations, normally engaging, had become coldly perfect. "You're different lately," Lisa from accounting mentioned during a budget meeting. More intense. Julian just nodded, his mind already mapping out his next moves. He had learned that revenge, like architecture, required proper planning. Every beam, every support, every angle had to be perfect. On the fifth day, Alina began to crack under the pressure of silence. He found her in the kitchen at midnight, a half-empty wine bottle beside her. "Do you remember," she slurred, "when we first met at that coffee shop in Redmond? You were so different from anyone I'd ever known." Julian walked past her to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of water. He remembered that day, how genuine she had seemed, how her smile had lit up the room. Now he wondered if it had all been an act, if she had been practicing deception from the very beginning. "You were reading that book about urban architecture," she continued desperately, trying to fill his silence. "I thought you were so sophisticated, so driven. Not like the trust fund boys I usually dated." Her words were meant to remind him of their connection, but they only served to highlight the betrayal. He had shared his dreams with her, his plans to revolutionize the Seattle skyline, and she had been planning to steal his money to run away with a man who had never built anything more complex than a bicep. The sixth day brought rain, heavy drops hammering against the windows of their home like nature itself was trying to wash away their lies. Alina spent the morning crying in their bedroom. He could hear her through the walls of his office, her phone buzzing repeatedly throughout the day. Damien, growing increasingly concerned about their plans falling apart, sent messages. "Baby, we need to move fast. Access the accounts before he does. Don't let him ruin everything we've planned." Julian added each message to his evidence file, his anger crystallizing into something cold and sharp. They thought he was weak, that he would crumble like the spoiled rich men Alina was used to. They had no idea what he was capable of. On the seventh day, exactly 1 week after the anniversary dinner, Julian decided it was time. He had gathered enough evidence to destroy them both, financially, legally, and socially. Every email, Every photo, every stolen dollar was documented and ready. He found Alina in the living room, staring out at the Seattle skyline he had helped shape. She turned when he entered, hope flickering across her face at this break in his silence. "Julian, please." She held up her hand, cutting off her words. "Sit down." His voice was calm, controlled, carrying the weight of 7 days of calculated planning. "We need to talk." Elena sank onto the couch, her face pale with anticipation. She didn't know it yet, but her comfortable world was about to shatter. Just as she had shattered his trust, his love, his belief in their shared future, Julian moved to the television, connecting his laptop to the screen. It was time to show her exactly what he had discovered, to make her understand the consequences of betraying a man who fought his way up from nothing. The game was ending, and Julian Price was about to declare checkmate. Julian stood before the living room television, his laptop connected and ready. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky. Buildings he had helped design, structures built on precision and trust, stood in stark contrast to his marriage. Alina perched on the edge of the couch, her fingers twisting the hem of her designer yoga top. "You've barely spoken to me for a week," she said softly. "What's there left to say?" "Plenty," Julian replied. "Like how long you've been planning to drain our accounts." Her head snapped up, eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" "Let me show you." He pressed a key and their joint account statements filled the screen. "See these transactions: yoga equipment, studio rentals, workshop fees. None of them are real." "Is it, Alina?" She protested. "Those are business expenses," she stammered. "For the studio expansion." "You mean Damien's gym expansion?" Another keystroke brought up their emails, the one where you two planned to fund your ventures with my money before running off together. "Elena, I can explain," she pleaded. "Can you explain these two?" Julian pulled up the photos next, dozens of intimate shots she had sent to Damien. "Or maybe you'd like to explain the hotel receipts, the late-night training sessions." Elena stumbled to her feet, reaching for him. "Please, you don't understand. I was confused, lost. Don't touch me." Julian's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "The only thing I don't understand is how I missed what a deceitful person you are." "That's not fair," she cried. "You were never home, always working, always at meetings. Damien actually saw me, appreciated me." Julian's laugh was harsh. "Appreciated you? Is that what you call this?" He pulled up Damien's messages. "Once we get the money, we can abandon your old life and start fresh." "You didn't mean that." Elena's voice cracked. "He loves me. Love." Julian advanced on her, his presence filling the room. "Let me tell you about love, Elena. Love is working 60-hour weeks to give your partner everything they want. Love is supporting your partner's dreams, not stealing from them." "I made a mistake," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "We can fix this. Go to counseling. Rebuild trust. There's nothing to fix." Julian turned back to his laptop, pulling up divorce papers. "I've already contacted my lawyer. You have 1 hour to pack your essentials and get out." "You can't do this." Elena's voice rose hysterically. "This is my house too." "Actually, it's not." He displayed another document. "The house is in my name only. Remember when you insisted we keep it that way for tax purposes? Funny how your scheme has backfired. Where am I supposed to go?" "I'm sure Damien has room at his place." Julian's smile was cold, though he might not have been as excited to have her now that she couldn't steal my money for his gym. "You're being cruel," Elena whispered. "Cruel." Julian's voice dropped dangerously low. "Cruel is plotting to steal from someone who gave you everything. Cruel is laughing about it with your lover while sleeping in my bed. What I'm doing is mercy. I could have you arrested for financial fraud." Elena sank back onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I never meant to hurt you." "Save your lies for someone who still believes them." Julian checked his watch. 53 minutes left. "I suggest you start packing." Can't we just talk about this? She tried one last time. 8 years of marriage has to mean something. It meant everything to me, Julian replied, his eyes hard as steel. Until I saw what it meant to you, a convenient cover while you planned your exit strategy. That's not true. I loved you. I still do. If you say you love me, Julian cut her off. I'll play the recording of you telling Damien how boring I am in bed. Your exact words were quite creative. Elena's mouth snapped shut, her face burning with shame. He gestured toward the stairs. 48 minutes. She stood on shaky legs, moving toward the staircase. At the bottom step, she turned back. What about my other things? I'll have them delivered to your yoga studio, he said in a professionally detached tone. After my lawyer reviews which items are legally yours. My car is in my name. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. You can call an Uber. Elena fled upstairs, her sobs echoing through the house. Julian listened to her frantic movements. Drawers yanking open, hangers scraping, zippers racing. The sounds of a life being packed away in minutes. He moved to the kitchen, pouring himself 2 fingers of bourbon. The amber liquid caught the light like the wedding ring he had already removed. 8 years reduced to an hour of packing and a lifetime of regret for her. At least 45 minutes later, Elena dragged 2 suitcases down the stairs. Her makeup was smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled. Gone was the confident yoga instructor who had thought she could play him for a fool. My mother's jewelry was a gift, she said bitterly. Julian took another sip of bourbon. It stays. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Bitterness crept into her voice. Unlike you and Damien, I don't leave things to chance. He set down his glass. Your Uber's here. Elena looked up in surprise. You didn't call one. I took the liberty, Julian explained. Wouldn't want you to miss your deadline. She grabbed her suitcase handles, knuckles white with tension. At the door she paused. Is there anything I can say to make this right? You said it all in your messages to Damien. Julian opened the door. Good luck with your new life. You'll need it. The Uber driver loaded her bags as Elena stood on the driveway, looking lost. Gone was her perfect posture, her confident yoga demeanor. She looked small against the night sky, a fallen star burning out. Julian, please, she pleaded. He shut the door, cutting off her final plea. Through the window, he watched the Uber pull away, taking with it 8 years of lies and betrayal. But this was just the beginning. Damien's punishment was next, and Julian had saved his best moves for the man who thought he could steal another man's life. The night was still young, and vengeance was a patient game. Prime Fit Seattle occupied a renovated warehouse in the trendy Grizzly district. Its massive windows were dark against the night sky. The parking lot was empty except for a gleaming black Dodge Challenger, Damien's pride and joy, bought with membership fees and stolen dreams. Julian parked his Orion on a side street, out of sight. He had watched this place for days, learning Damien's routine. The gym owner always stayed late on Thursdays, counting the week's cash and taking stock alone. Tonight, that privacy would cost him. The clock on Julian's dashboard read 11:47 p.m., right on schedule. The gym's front lights clicked off. Julian stepped out of his car, his footsteps silent on the damp pavement. The night air carried the scent of approaching rain, washing away the neighborhood's usual food truck aromas. Damien emerged from the side door, his gym bag slung over his shoulder, keys jingling as he locked up, muscles flexing beneath his tight trainer shirt. He was humming, probably thinking about his next session with someone else's wife. Damien Cole. Julian's voice cut through the night air. Damien turned, his trademark smile already in place. Sorry, man, we're closed. But we open at. The smile faltered as he took in Julian's expression. Who's asking? You know exactly who I am. Julian stepped into the glow of a security light. Or should I show you the pictures you've been exchanging with my wife? Recognition flickered across Damien's face, followed quickly by his practiced charm. Look, buddy, whatever Elena told you, She didn't tell me anything. Julian moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. Your messages did all the talking. The plans for my money, the jokes about how foolish I was, the hotel meetups. That's just locker room talk, man. Damien raised his hands, still trying to deflect. Elena and we're just friends. She needed someone to talk to. The first punch caught Damien completely off guard, snapping his head back. He stumbled, his gym bag dropping to the wet pavement. Friends. Julian's voice remained eerily calm. Is that what you call someone you're planning to steal from? Damien touched his bleeding lip, his bravado turning to anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Elena came to me. She was unhappy, lonely. So you decided to help by being intimate with her and stealing my money. Another punch, this time to the ribs, sent Damien doubling over, gasping. She wanted it. Damien tried to straighten up, raising his fists. You were too busy with your precious career to notice she was too bored to be satisfied. Julian caught Damien's wild swing easily, using the momentum to slam him against the gym's brick wall. The only unsatisfactory thing about me, he growled, is how predictably I destroy people who cross me. You think this changes anything? Damien spat blood onto the pavement. Elena's still leaving you. We had it all planned. You mean this plan? Julian pulled out his phone, displaying their email exchanges, the one where you convinced her to drain our accounts for your gym expansion. That worked out well, didn't it? Fear flickered in Damien's eyes. Those emails are private. Nothing's private anymore, Damien. Julian's grip tightened on the trainer's throat. Not your messages, not your financial records, not even your creative accounting at the gym. What are you talking about? The IRS is very interested in businesses that don't report cash payments. Julian smiled coldly, almost as interested as they are in personal trainers who help plan financial fraud. Damien's voice shook, his confidence cracking. I already have another punch, landed precise and brutal. Every message, every photo, every deleted email planning to steal my money. It's amazing what people keep in their trash folders. Damien slumped against the wall, blood trickling from his nose. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Elena said you'd never fight for her. This isn't about fighting for her. Julian landed another blow, watching Damien crumple to the ground. This is about consequences. You thought you could take what's mine. Let me show you how wrong you were. Please, Damien, he gasped, raising his hands. I'll stay away from her. From both of you. Now you sound like all the other cowards I grew up with. Julian crouched beside him, his tone menacing. But you know what? I believe you. Want to know why? Damien nodded frantically. Because if I ever see you near Elena again, near my house, or even in my part of Seattle, Julian's voice dropped to a whisper, what happens tonight will feel like a warm-up. Understood. Damien managed, as blood and saliva dripped from his swollen lips. Good. Julian stood, straightening his jacket. Ho and Damien, better start looking for a new location for your gym. This neighborhood is about to get too expensive for your kind of business. What does that mean? Fear made Damien's voice crack. It means I just bought your building. Julian smiled coldly. Amazing how quickly property owners sell when they learn about potential health code violations. Your lease renewal next month. Consider it denied. Damien tried to stand but slipped in his own blood. This gym is all I have. You should have thought about that before trying to steal from me. Julian turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Those membership fees you've been pocketing. The IRS audit starts Monday. Better hire a good accountant. I'll tell everyone what you did. Damien called after him. About tonight. Julian turned back, his laugh devoid of humor. Tell them what? How you got beaten up by the husband of the woman you were with. How you were planning to steal his money. Go ahead. I'm sure your clients will love that story. He walked away, leaving Damien broken and bleeding on the pavement. The first drops of rain began to fall, washing away the blood, but not the lesson. Nobody stole from Julian Price without paying the price. His phone buzzed with a text from Melina. "I'm staying at my sister's. Can we please talk?" Julian deleted the message without responding. Let her wonder where he was, what he was doing. Let her imagine the fate awaiting her lover. Fear was a powerful teacher, and class was still in session. The night air felt cleaner as he drove home, as if the rain were washing away more than just blood. But his work wasn't finished. Destroying Damien was just the beginning. Now it was time to dismantle every piece of the life Elena had taken for granted. Tomorrow, the real pain would begin. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across Prime Fit Seattle's entrance as Elena hurried through the parking lot, her designer yoga bag bouncing against her hip. The same bag Julian had given her last Christmas. 3 unanswered calls to Damien drove her there, each one feeding the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The gym's front door was locked, unusual for that time of morning. Through the windows, she could see the empty reception desk, normally buzzing with early clients. Something was wrong. "Damien?" She knocked on the glass, peering into the darkened interior. A shadow moved inside, followed by uneven footsteps. The door opened to reveal Damien's battered face, one eye swollen shut, dried blood crusting his split lip. "Oh my goodness." Elena reached for him, but he jerked away. "What happened to you? What happened?" Damien's laugh was bitter, tinged with pain. "Your husband did this. The one you said was too focused on his career to notice anything. Julian did this." Her hand flew to her mouth. "But he never what?" Damien spat, limping back into the gym. "Never fights. Never gets his hands dirty. I guess you didn't know him as well as you thought." Elena followed him inside, her designer shoes clicking on the polished concrete floor. The morning class regulars were conspicuously absent, their usual spots empty under the harsh fluorescent lights. "We need to call the police," she said, reaching for her phone. "And tell them what?" Damien dropped onto a weight bench, wincing. "That your husband caught us stealing his money, that we were planning to run away together. Great plan. We weren't stealing." "Don't." Damien's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't try that innocent act with me. Not now. Your husband showed me the emails, Elena. Every single one." Color drained from her face. "He knows everything. Everything." Damien touched his swollen jaw. "The money, the hotel meetings, our plans for the gym expansion. He even bought my building just to shut me down." "He what?" "Oh, it gets better." Damien's laugh was hollow. "The IRS is auditing my books on Monday. Apparently, someone tipped them off about unreported cash payments." "He can't do that." Even as she said it, Elena knew better. This was the side of Julian she had never understood, the street-smart survivor beneath the polished engineer facade. Damien stood grimacing. "And you know what the worst part is? He was right about everything. About us, about the money, about how pathetic this whole thing was." "What are you saying?" Elena stepped closer, reaching for him. "We can figure this out together. Once things calm down." "Damien, push your hand away. There is no together, Elena. Your husband made that very clear last night, right before he rearranged my face." "But our plans are done." Damien moved to the front desk, pulling out a gym bag. "The gym's finished. My reputation is shot. Half my clients already canceled their memberships after getting anonymous emails about our affair. We can start over somewhere else. Elena, use my savings." "What savings?" Damien's eyes were cold. "The ones in your joint account. The ones Julian has already frozen. Face it, Elena. We lost. Game over. You're just giving up," she cried, tears streaking her makeup. "After everything we planned. Planning is easy. Reality's a lot harder." Damien zipped up his bag. "I'm going away. From you. From this whole mess." He paused at the door. "Do yourself a favor. Stay away from the gym. Your husband made it clear what would happen if he saw us together again. But you can't just leave me." Elena grabbed his arm. I gave up everything for you. No, you gave up everything for a fantasy. Damien shook her off. And now we're both paying for it. Goodbye, Elena. The door closed behind him with a final click, leaving Elena alone in the empty gym. Her reflection stared back from the wall-length mirrors, designer clothes, perfect hair, hollow eyes. Everything she had built her life around was crumbling. Her phone buzzed with another email from Julian's lawyer. More documents to sign, more assets frozen, more proof of her infidelity and financial schemes. She thought she was so clever, planning her escape from suburban boredom. Now she was the one trapped. Desperation drove her across town to Julian's office building. The security guard's eyes followed her as she rushed through the lobby, her new heels clicking on marble floors that suddenly felt too opulent, too much like the life she had thrown away. The elevator ride to the engineering firm's floor gave her time to rehearse her speech. She would apologize, beg for another chance, promise to make things right. But when the doors opened, Julian was already waiting. "You can't be here," his voice carried down the hallway, drawing curious glances from his colleagues. "Please, just listen." Elena moved toward him, hands raised in supplication. "What you did to Damien was merciful compared to what he deserved." Julian's eyes were hard. "Just like letting you walk away was merciful compared to pressing charges for attempted theft." "I made a mistake." Her voice cracked with desperation. "We can fix this. Go to counseling. Rebuild trust." "Trust?" Julian's laugh was cold. "You want to talk about trust after I found pictures of you with another man in our bed? After you planned to steal my money? It wasn't like that." But even to her own ears, the defense sounded weak. "Then tell me what it was like." Julian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Tell me how you justified every lie, every betrayal. Explain how you planned to destroy everything we built together." "I was unhappy," she said, the word feeling small and insignificant against the weight of her actions. "Unhappy." Julian's voice dropped dangerously low. "I gave you everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle you wanted. But it wasn't enough, was it? You needed excitement, needed to feel special." "Julian, please." "You're not special, Elena. You're just another bored housewife who thought she could play games with people's lives." He turned away, dismissing her. "Now you can be unhappy in the life you chose. What am I supposed to do?" Tears streamed down her face, ruining her careful makeup. "Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore." Julian pressed the elevator button. "But here's some free advice. Get a good lawyer." The elevator doors opened, and a group of executives stepped out, forcing Elena to back away. They nodded respectfully to Julian, ignoring her obvious distress. "Don't contact me again," Julian said as she stepped into the elevator. "Next time, I'll have security escort you out." The doors closed on her tears, on her pleas, on the life she destroyed. In the mirrored walls of the elevator, Elena watched her reflection. The woman who thought she could have it all, now left with nothing. Outside, the Seattle sun felt too bright, too harsh. Her phone buzzed again. Another email from her yoga studio. They were reviewing her position after multiple client complaints. Even her career, built on a promise of peace and wellness, was dissolving. Everything she had taken for granted, the house, the cars, the comfortable lifestyle, had been stripped away in days. Damien was gone. Her lover had turned coward in the face of real consequences. Julian, the man she dismissed as predictable, had proven to be anything but. The game was over, and Elena had lost every piece she had tried to play. Meanwhile, the law office of Kingston and Associates occupied the 32nd floor of Seattle's newest glass tower. Julian sat across from Michael Kingston, watching as the veteran divorce attorney reviewed the final paperwork. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Cascades, matching his mood. "You've built quite a case," Kingston said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Financial fraud, documented infidelity, attempted theft. She doesn't have a leg to stand on." "I want everything," Julian said firmly. The prenup specified infidelity as grounds for total forfeiture. She's contesting it. Kingston pulled out another document. Claims emotional abandonment. Says you were never home. Show her the hotel receipts. Julian leaned forward. The ones where she used our joint account to pay for rooms with Damien. Let's see her explain that to a judge. Kingston nodded, adding the receipts to his file. Her lawyers are requesting a settlement meeting. She's willing to be reasonable. I'm not. Julian's eyes hardened. She wanted excitement. Let's give her the excitement of watching everything disappear. Mr. Price, Kingston said, downing his pen. In my 30 years of practice, I've never seen someone so thoroughly document their spouse's betrayal. The photos, the emails, the financial records. How did you get all this? Growing up where I did, you learn to watch for snakes before they strike. And you learn to strike back harder when they do. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kingston's assistant entered with a fresh stack of papers. The bank statements you requested. Sir, she said, placing them on the desk. And there's an update on the gym situation. Julian turned. Tell me, the IRS audit revealed significant tax evasion. She consulted her tablet. They're freezing Mr. Cole's assets pending investigation. Perfect. Julian allowed himself a small smile. What about the building lease? Terminated as of next week. The new development plans have already been approved by the city council. Kingston whistled low. Remind me never to cross you, Mr. Price. That's what Elena never understood. Julian returned to his seat. I built myself up from nothing. Did she really think I wouldn't know how to tear someone down? Kingston pulled out another document. Speaking of your wife, she's been trying to access your joint investment accounts. Already frozen, along with her credit cards, gym membership, and country club access. Amazing how quickly the elite crowd turns their back when the money stops flowing. She's claiming half the house, which is in my name only. Julian cut him off. Her idea. Remember, she said it would help with taxes when she opened her yoga studio. Very convenient. Kingston made another note. The court date is set for next month, but with this evidence, we could push for an earlier hearing. No, Julian said in a calculated tone. Let her stew for a while. Let her feel what it's like to live without the lifestyle she took for granted. His phone buzzed with another message from Elena. Please, we need to talk. My lawyer says I could lose everything. That was the first honest thing she had said in months. Julian muttered, deleting the message. Kingston cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Her lawyer mentioned something about personal items still at the house, already boxed and ready for delivery. Julian's tone was businesslike. After we verify none of it was purchased with my money. And if she disputes the ownership, then she can explain to the judge how she afforded designer clothes on a yoga teacher's salary. Julian stood. Are we done here? Kingston gathered the papers. Just need your signature on these final forms. Then we can file for an expedited hearing. Julian signed with swift, decisive strokes. Each signature was another nail in the coffin of his marriage, another step toward erasing Elena from his life. One last thing, Kingston said as Julian reached the door. She's requested temporary support during the proceedings. Claims she has no income since the yoga studio let her go. Julian's laugh was devoid of warmth. The studio where she was meeting Damien after hours, the one that fired her when our affair became public, is not my problem anymore. The judge might see it differently. Julian's voice carried the weight of certainty. A calculating woman who plotted to steal from her husband while being with another man. Let her find her own way now. Outside the law office, Seattle's afternoon traffic flowed beneath gathering storm clouds. Julian's phone buzzed again, this time an email from his property management company. The lease termination for Prime Fit Seattle is complete. In 2 weeks, Damien's dream of a fitness empire will be reduced to equipment sold at auction. Another message popped up from Elena's sister. She's a mess, Julian. At least talk to her. He deleted it without responding. Let them all beg and plead. He had learned long ago that mercy was just weakness in disguise. Rain began to fall as he drove home, fat drops against the Orion's windshield. The weather matched his mood, a cleansing storm washing away the last traces of his old life. But unlike Elena, unlike Damien, he would emerge stronger from the deluge. The game was in its final moves, and Julian Price was planning for keeps. Later that night, in a rundown motel with a flickering neon sign, Elena's old persona was replaced by the harsh reality of consequences. The motel sign buzzed with failing neon, casting a sickly purple light through the thin curtains of room 115. Elena sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at her phone's dwindling battery. Her designer suitcases looked out of place against the stained carpet, the last remnants of a life that was slipping away. A knock at the door made her jump. "Housekeeping," she called, her voice cracking. "Not today." She called out again, and the maid's footsteps retreated, leaving her alone with the hum of an ancient air conditioner and her spiraling thoughts. Her phone showed a string of rejected credit card notifications. The platinum card she had used for yoga retreats in Bali declined. The visa that paid for her organic meal delivery was suspended. Even her personal checking account was frozen, pending the divorce investigation. "This can't be happening," she whispered, dialing her lawyer's number again. "Elena, I told you not to call unless it's an emergency." Patricia Moore's strained voice said, "It is an emergency. They're saying I violated the prenup, that I forfeit everything because of the affair, which you documented extensively in emails and text messages." Patricia's sigh crackled through the speaker. "Messages that your husband has copies of, along with hotel receipts, bank statements, and photos that would make a divorce court judge blush. There has to be something we can do." Elena's hand twisted in her unwashed hair. "Some way to fight this." "Fight what?" "The evidence that you were planning to steal from our joint accounts. The documented affair with a man who's now under IRS investigation. Your husband's legal team has built a case that's practically airtight." "But I need money," she whispered, tears threatening to ruin what was left of her makeup. "The motel won't let me stay another week without payment. My cards are all declined." "That's what happens when you plot to drain joint accounts," Patricia said firmly. "Elena, actions have consequences. Your husband's lawyers just filed for an expedited hearing. They want present evidence of attempted financial fraud. He's trying to destroy you." Elena sank onto the bed. "Everything I built, everything he built," Patricia corrected. "The house is in his name. The cars are in his name. Even your yoga studio's lease was technically under his corporation. Face it, Elena. You played a dangerous game and lost." "What about Damien?" she asked. "He was part of this too." "Damien Cole." Patricia's laugh was sharp. "The man who's selling gym equipment to pay his tax bills has been named in your divorce proceedings as a co-conspirator in attempted fraud. You won't be helping anyone." The line went dead as Patricia hung up. Elena stared at her phone until the screen dimmed, then went black like her future. Another knock at the door, harder this time. "Management, we need to discuss your bill." Elena grabbed her purse and checked for cash. $23 and some loose change, not even enough for another night. Her wedding ring caught the light as she dug through her bag. She tried calling earlier, only to learn it had been reported stolen. "Just a minute," she called frantically, dialing another number. "Prime Fit Seattle. This is Marcus." "Marcus, I need to speak to Damien. It's urgent." "Sorry, Mom. Mr. Cole no longer works here. The gym's under new management pending the sale of the property." "Sale? But this is his gym. His dream was built on shaky foundations." A new voice cut in. "Just like your plans to steal my money." Elena nearly dropped the phone. "Julian, what are you doing at the gym?" "Overseeing the liquidation." His tone was businesslike. "Amazing what you can buy when people face tax fraud charges. Tell me, did Damien ever mention how he handled cash payments?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, the IRS seems to think differently. They're very interested in his creative accounting methods, almost as interested as they are in those transfers you made from our joint account. The motel manager knocked again. "Ma'am, we need to discuss your outstanding balance." "Please," Elena whispered into the phone. "I need help. I don't have anywhere to go." "You have exactly what you planned for me." Julian's voice was cold. "Nothing." "How does it feel, Elena? Was it worth it?" "I made a mistake. I never meant to get caught, to face consequences, to end up in some cheap motel while your lover runs away to escape prosecution. You did this to yourself. Now live with it." The line went dead. Elena's knees gave out, and she slid to the floor as the manager used his key to open the door. Hours later, Elena stood on the sidewalk outside the motel, her designer suitcases at her feet. The sun was setting behind the Seattle skyline, painting the buildings in shades of gold. While she had once plotted betrayal, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey babe, got a new phone. Had to leave town for a while. Don't try to contact me." That was it. Damien had run, leaving her to face the consequences alone. The man who had promised her excitement, a fresh start, had disappeared like morning dew under the harsh sun of reality. She tried calling her sister again, but the call went straight to voicemail. Even family had limits, it seemed, especially when Julian's lawyers had made sure everyone knew about her planned theft and documented betrayal. A city bus rolled past, advertising yoga classes at a new studio across town. Her old students would be there now, learning from someone else, someone who hadn't thrown away their career for an affair, someone who hadn't been exposed as a fraud. Thunder rolled across the Seattle sky as the first drops of rain began to fall. Elena looked down at her new heels, the ones Julian had bought for her birthday last year. They weren't made for walking in the rain. But nothing in her life had prepared her for this fall from grace. She had played with fire, thinking she was too clever to get burned. Now she watched her world turn to ash, with no one left to blame but herself. The courthouse steps gleamed in the morning sun as Julian descended them, divorce decree in hand. Inside the manila envelope, 12 pages of legal documentation spelled out his complete victory. Behind him, he could hear Elena's muffled sobs as her lawyer explained the judge's ruling. Total forfeiture of assets. The prenup was ironclad. With the documented infidelity and attempted fraud, Julian didn't need to hear the rest. He had won exactly as he had planned. 3 months of calculated moves had stripped Elena of everything: her comfortable lifestyle, her reputation, her dreams of running away with her lover. The woman who had thought she could play him for a fool was now facing the consequences of her choices. A reporter from the Seattle Business Journal approached, notebook in hand. "Any comment on the judge's ruling?" "Justice served," Julian replied simply, straightening his Italian silk tie. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a building to design." His Orion purred to life as he slid behind the wheel. On the passenger seat lay blueprints for his latest project, a 40-story tower that would reshape the Seattle skyline. Success, he believed, was the best revenge. His phone buzzed with a text from Simon, his project manager. "Prime Fit Seattle demolition starts tomorrow. Wanna watch?" Julian smiled. The gym where Elena and Damien had plotted their betrayal would soon be replaced by luxury condominiums, designed by him, each floor a testament to his victory. He drove past familiar landmarks. The restaurant where he caught Elena's betrayal now served different customers. The yoga studio where she had built her facade of peace and wellness now under new management. Every piece of her old life had been methodically dismantled. Naomi Brooks was waiting in his office, her architect's portfolio spread across his desk. Her dark hair fell in professional waves around her face, framing eyes that held intelligence and strength. No fake smiles, no hidden agendas, just brilliant design work and honest ambition. "I heard about the divorce ruling," Naomi said as he entered. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Julian set down his briefcase. "Now we can focus on what matters. How's the tower design coming?" Naomi's smile held a warmth he hadn't seen in years. "I had an idea about the penthouse levels. Want to discuss it over dinner? Julian studied her for a moment. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have considered mixing business with pleasure. But Naomi wasn't Elena. She had built her own career, earned her own success. She understood the value of hard work and loyalty. I know a good Italian place, he said. 7 o'clock. Perfect, Naomi replied, gathering her drawings with efficient, purposeful movements. At the door she paused. Oh, and Julian. I heard about Damien Cole. What about him? He's working as a personal trainer in Phoenix now, at a budget gym. Naomi's smile turned knowing. Quite a fall from owning his own place. Julian nodded, satisfaction flowing through him. Life is about putting people where they belong. After Naomi left, he turned to the wall of windows overlooking downtown Seattle. 3 months ago, he had stood there plotting his revenge. Now he stood victorious. Every piece of his plan executed to perfection. His phone buzzed with an email from his lawyer. Final asset division complete. Ms. Price's remaining possessions have been moved to storage. Storage fees are her responsibility after 30 days. Another message followed from a business contact. Heard about the divorce. Brutal outcome. Remind me never to cross you, Price. Julian allowed himself a small smile. The whispers would spread through Seattle's business community, not about how he had been betrayed, but about how he handled it. No one would dare underestimate him again. Evening found him at Lorenzo's with Naomi, the same restaurant where he had caught Elena's betrayal. But tonight was different. The candlelight caught the intelligence in Naomi's eyes as she explained her design modifications. The client loves the sustainable energy features, she said, spreading blueprints across the white tablecloth. But I think we can push it further. Show me. As she walked him through her innovations, Julian felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A genuine connection. No games, no hidden motives, just shared ambition and mutual respect. I heard about your ex-wife, Naomi said later over dessert. Living in some extended stay motel, teaching yoga at a strip mall studio. Her words, meant to remind him of the past, brought a small bitter smile. I learned young that loyalty matters more than anything. Is that why you're giving me a chance? Naomi's directness was refreshing. After what you did, I'm giving you a chance because you've earned it. He met her gaze. You built your career on talent and hard work, not manipulation and lies. Good answer, Naomi said with a genuine smile. Though I have to admit, watching you dismantle their scheme was impressive, ruthlessly efficient, just like your designs. Julian leaned back. Sometimes you have to tear down the old to build something better. The next morning, Julian watched as demolition crews prepared to take down Prime Fit Seattle. The gym sign had already been removed, leaving ghostly outlines on the brick facade. A small crowd had gathered. Former clients, curious onlookers, even a few reporters. His phone buzzed with a final message from Elena. I heard they're tearing down the gym. Was any of it worth it? All this destruction just to punish us? Julian typed back a single reply. Watch it fall. The wrecking ball swung and brick crumbled, each impact erasing another piece of their betrayal and making way for his new vision. In 6 months, a gleaming residential tower would stand there, its penthouses offering views of the Cascades. He and Naomi would oversee every detail of the construction. That evening, Julian sat on his patio, watching the sunset behind the Cascades. His phone showed another message from Naomi. Dinner tonight. My treat. He smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. The mountain air carried the scent of possibility. Behind him, the house stood clean and peaceful, purged of Elena's presence. Ahead lay new projects, new challenges, and perhaps with Naomi, a chance at something real. The game was over. Julian Price had won every round. More importantly, he had rebuilt himself stronger than before, turning betrayal into triumph, hurt into success. Some men might have been broken by what Elena and Damien had planned. Instead, he had taken their schemes and turned them into the foundation of his victory. The sun dipped below the Cascades, painting the sky in shades of victory. Tomorrow would bring new designs, new buildings reaching toward the heavens. But tonight, Julian savored the peace that came with complete vindication. He had survived the tough streets of his youth, built an empire from nothing. And now he protected it all from those who tried to steal it. Let them all remember, nobody betrayed Julian Price and walked away unscathed. That was a lesson written in the Seattle skyline, carved in steel and glass, as permanent as the Cascades themselves. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.